So this is your, we're going to go over histology here. This is chapter 4. And histology means hist, here, means tissue. And of course this means the study of. So we're going to study tissues. There are four main primary tissue types in human beings. Epithelial tissue. Epi means on top. Thelial means connected. Then there's connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. So the first thing to memorize are these four tissue types. If you want to make a mnemonic, you can do that. It's epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. So epithelial tissues. You need to know their characteristics and functions. These cover anatomical surfaces like your skin. An anatomical surface is exposed to air. Now, if you take your digestive system, you know that you have your mouth and then you have a long tube all the way to your rectum. Well, that's a tube, and it's not always empty, but it still has a space, so it has a surface. And that's called an anatomical surface. So that would have epithelial tissue on it. Okay? So glands look something like this. A gland is like a sweat gland or an oil gland, something like this. So you have epithelial tissues in here, and epithelial tissues line this duct. Okay? This is a duct. A duct is a tube. Okay? These are cells, and in here we have more cells. These are all epithelial cells, and they'll secrete something like sweat or oil or hormones, and then those will be pushed out through this duct as little molecules. Okay? So glands are made of epithelial cells, and they're lined with epithelial cells. So there are two types of glands. Exocrine secrete their products into the ducts, like this is an exocrine gland, to the outside of the body, such as sweat. Then there are endocrine glands. You've heard of endocrine glands. They secrete hormones, but it goes right into the extracellular fluid and then into a capillary, which is blood. Okay. I'll give you more information on that when we go through the heart and blood vessels. So here's how we classify these epithelial tissues. The first classification is by shape. And the shapes are squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. So that's the next thing you need to memorize. So the four tissue types, remember epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. So we're on epithelial. So the three types, these are based on their shapes, are squamous. Squamous means flat. So they look, something like that maybe. And they have a very tiny width or depth. Cuboidal looks almost like little cubes. Okay? And columnar, like cuboidal, but just taller, like a column. Okay? These line the respiratory tract and the digestive tract and the reproductive tracts. The cuboidals, they form the linings of small tubules and glands. So just memorize the squamous, cuboidal, and columnar, and then what that shape represents, like flat irregular shape, and it lines blood vessels in the alveoli of your lungs. They're 1 cell thick. So when you get down to, you know what a blood vessel is, right? Here's a blood vessel. This gets smaller. This is called an artery, yes? Artery. That gets smaller as it goes distal to the heart. away from the heart. Now we have an arteriole. And finally, it gets really, 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 really small. 1 cell thick. The tube is 1 cell thick, and that's called a capillary. And that tube, if I take a picture of that tube like this, right? This is the capillary now. This is small. The epithelial cells are 1 cell thick, and they're simple squamous. Okay, and on the inside as well, or the other side as well, right? 1 cell thick. Then you have, and you're not responsible for this, but you have these little, oh darn, what happened? Okay, we'll do it again. You have these simple squamous, right, like this. You have these holes or pores, and the plasma will just pour out into the extracellular fluid, and then you have cells here. So now the food that this cell needs will eat, because diffusion will move molecules from high concentration, which is in the plasma, to low concentration, which is in the cell. I'll give you more of that later. Oh, I see what happened. I went to the, okay, fine. Okay, the second way that we classify epithelial tissues is by how many layers of these tissues there are. So simple means 1 single layer, and stratified is 2 or more layers. Okay? We want this single layer because we need diffusion across the membrane. So in the lungs, how's air going to get into your blood capillaries? You have to have, we have these little balloons, we'll call them balloons, right? Like this. These are called alveoli, okay? And these are 1 cell thick, and it's simple squamous. And all simple squamous that are in alveoli and capillaries are called endothelial cells. They're still simple squamous, but specifically now we call them endothelial cells. And now when air comes in, it can diffuse right through the cell body of this simple squamous epithelial cell. Now stratified is strange. You have a basement membrane at the bottom of a tissue of these epithelial cells, and they look like cuboidal at the bottom, but they're not. When they divide, mitosis, now there's 2 layers, right? They move up like this, and when they get to the surface, that's what you see on your skin. Now they're now the simple squamous features really show up. Okay, now they're like this, and that's the skin that brushes off, that you can just you know, take your fingernail and disrupt that, and those will come right off. But when they're born down here at the bottom layer, they're this shape, and they're highly functional, and they get blood supply from down here because they get no blood supply up here. And as these cells divide and push these upwards, they get flatter, and they get more protein inside of them, so they're kind of tough, and they're basically waterproof. And you'll find this on your skin, of course, and in your mouth and your anus. So deep to the first epithelial cells, in the case of the stratified or simple cells, is another layer called the basement membrane. I showed that to you. That's right here. This is basement membrane. It kind of holds all of the cells together, and it attaches the underlying connective tissue to this layer of epithelial cells. It contains no cells, it's all connective tissue, and it's secreted by the epithelial cells and the connective tissue cells below it, and they intertwine fibers. Provides structural support for those cells so that they don't wander away, and it helps to glue the epithelial cells to the underlying connective tissue cells. So here's a picture. Here's our simple squamous. Right, they're not really that thick. They're a little bit thicker than that. But they're irregular in shape and they're flat. And you'll find them in the blood vessels, lining the blood vessels and lining the alveoli of the lungs, and they permit exchange of gases and of particles. Now the stratified squamous, you'll see at the bottom, they look cuboidal. This is cuboidal. Those look the same. So you have to look up, 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 and you'll see that these are actually squamous. This is a stratified squamous and that's a stratified squamous. It begins its life looking like a cuboidal, but it's not. It's stratified squamous. And you'll know by where you find it, because you're only going to find stratified squamous on the skin, in your mouth, the vagina, anything that has a lot of friction, and it protects against abrasions, drying out, and infection. Then the simple cuboidal, these line the kidney tubules, which you'll find out about, glands as we saw, and these are kind of active. They can manufacture products and secrete them, and they can absorb molecules. Okay, the stratified cuboidal are never this many layers. Stratified cuboidal, I haven't seen a tissue that has more than 2 layers. Okay, sweat glands, water, like I said, sebaceous glands, oil glands. Okay, moving on to columnar. Simple columnar, 1 layer. You see all the bottoms of the cells touch that basement membrane, and they're taller than they are wide. And these line the digestive tract, and they have little projections on them called microvilli to increase surface area so they can absorb all the food that you eat. And they definitely produce mucus. They have a modified cell in them called a mucus cell, okay, or a goblet cell, and that produces mucus. Okay, then we have stratified columnar. You hardly ever see this. It's only in the epididymis in the male reproductive system, the mammary glands, and the larynx, and they secrete mucus. It's rare to find these. Remember, all of these have basement membranes. So most epithelial tissues line or cover body cavities or surfaces. And the glands, they can be very simple, like the one I showed you, like this, or they can be really complicated like this. It doesn't matter. It just gives more area to secrete their products, to manufacture their products, and then to secrete them through one duct. This is like a sweat gland. Okay? Now, how do these epithelial cells hold themselves together? Well, we have these different junctions, and these are ways that nature has invented to hold these together in different ways, because sometimes we need some fluid around the cells. Remember, we have basement membrane. Okay, cells. Sometimes we want fluids to be able to pass through them. So that would be a very loose junction, but in some areas we want a very, very tight junction. So we have these tight junctions. And then sometimes we want communication between these cells, so we make little holes between these cells. And that's called a gap junction. And the adhesion junctions, these are like spot welds. We have fibers that go like this, okay, on the walls. And it really holds those very tightly together. This is what they look like. These are the tight junctions. This is just a close-up of this. See how you sort of sew them together like this? So it's leak-proof. So that's what you want in your intestines. And then here we have these adhesion junctions. And you see the fibers are looser here, so it allows intercellular fluid between these cells. So this is not a tight junction. This is an adhesion junction. It just loosely holds the cells together. And it allows, movement and a lot of flexibility. And then the last one is the gap junction, and you can see there's a little channel right here. Because sometimes we want, small ions and things to move through here. Calcium, hydrogen, chloride, potassium, sodium, things like that. Okay, so that's the difference there. So let's move on to connective tissue. The functions of connective tissue are to support the soft organs of the body. They connect different parts of the body, like muscle to bone in the case of a tendon, or bone to bone in case of a ligament. It stores fat and it produces blood cells. So connective tissue contains cells. Okay? The cells actually secrete matrix and fibers. Oops, I went the wrong way. Secrete. Okay. So matrix is like a gel. Sort of like Jello. And then fibers. Some thin fibers, and if you're curious, thick fibers like this are collagen. Then there are reticular. And then there are what do we call these? Wow, that just left my brain somewhere. Hang on. Let me see if I can find it in your book. Elastin. So these are elastic, which means that they can stretch and they'll go back to their original shape. And if you look at a slide, they have bends in them, so you know they're elastic fibers. They can kink and then go back to their original shape. So if you flap the top of your ear over, pull the top of your ear down and let it go, it'll go right back. That's because of the elastic fibers in that cartilage. So here is like loose areolar. This is a loose connective tissue. Here are the elastic fibers. You see they have a lot of different, shapes. A macrophage is a white blood cell that defends this tissue. It wanders around and it's going to look for pathogens. And the mast cell is the same. And the lymphocyte is the same. And the neutrophil is the same. And the plasma cell. The ground substance, this is the gel. So this is your gel here. This is fat. This is a capillary. These are fibroblasts. This is the cell which creates these collagen fibers here. These are the collagen fibers. This is the reticular fibers. That's your elastic fiber. And they're all produced by this fibroblast. Okay. And okay. So this is loose connective tissue. There are a lot of different types of fibers in it, a lot of different cells in it. There's a lot of room for, see, if a pathogen came in here, a bacteria that your body couldn't identify, it could make a house there and grow and make a family because it's warm. There's a lot of nutrition there. You can see that it would be a great growing place for a bacteria. So we have to have all of these cells which defend against it, and they will fight. Bacteria will look like that, and this will just engulf it and neutralize it. This can do the same, and this can do the same, And this can do the same. Okay? So this is your loose tissue. We were just looking at the cartoon. Now this is the cartoon of this. So this is an actual picture of loose connective tissue. And you can see the elastin, the fibroblasts, and the collagen fibers. This is dense connective tissue. You can see that fibers and cells take up most of the space, and there's very little empty space. Okay? Where you see a lot of empty space, that's loose. Where you see very little empty space, that will be dense. That's not an empty space, it's just out of focus. This is very, very dense. This would be a tendon. So then we have fibrous connective tissue, and this provides strength and elasticity, contains fibers and cells embedded in a gel matrix as all connective tissues, all proper connective tissues do. The matrix is a material that's gel-like and can be either soupy up to a soft plastic feeling. The cells are fibroblasts, and they create the matrix. Right? Matrix is gel. And then we have these defending cells. These are white blood cells, and they're the army. Okay, and they go in and they make sure that that stays clean of pathogens. A pathogen is a disease-producing organism. The fibers again are collagen, elastic, and reticular. So we have basically 4 types of connective tissue. We have loose, we have dense, elastic, and reticular. The loose is, kind of fills in all the empty spaces, surrounds organs, it's underneath your skin, surrounds blood vessels. The dense forms tendons, ligaments, and deep layers of the skin. Elastic surrounds the stomach and bladder and maintains their shape so that when your stomach expands, it can go back to its original shape. The reticular make up the internal framework of soft organs such as the liver and the spleen, and the lymph nodes. Specialized connective tissues are cartilage, bone, blood, and adipose or fat. Okay? So the fluid matrix of plasma is the matrix, and the cells are the red and white blood cells, and then the platelets, which are not cells, they're cell particles. Cartilage is produced by chondroblasts. That's a good test question. And those chondroblasts live in little shells called lacunae. I'll show you a picture, but they look something like a coffee bean with an eye in it. Okay. This is the lacuna. And this is the chondrocyte. Okay? The chondroblast. And they have a lot of collagen, and the collagen is clear in cartilage. In bone, the osteoblast are the cells that secrete the collagen, which will then attract calcium salts to make them hard. Okay? So here's your lacuna right there, and here's your chondroblast right there. Okay? And here's a fat cell. They're very easy to identify. This is a blood vessel, and the cells just look like big blobs, and you can see the cell membrane here. Moving on to muscle tissue. The functions of muscle tissue are to move joints and move food through the digestive system, moves blood through the blood vessels, and enables the heart to contract. There are 3 types of muscle tissue. Skeletal, that's the one you're used to, your biceps, your triceps, your quads, your hamstrings. You have conscious control over skeletal muscles. Then there's cardiac muscle. This is the muscle that contracts your heart. It's only found in the heart. And then smooth muscle. This is like your digestive system. and that's responsible for peristalsis, or the movement that moves food from your mouth to your anus. So skeletal muscles move the joints of your body and are under conscious control, and the cells are multinucleated, and the reason for that is because the cells are as long as your entire muscle. So if you're a very tall person like Shaquille O'Neal, you could have a cell, a muscle cell, that's longer than 2.5 feet in certain muscles. Okay, cardiac is involuntary. These cells have one nucleus. Good test question. One nucleus. Smooth. That's an E. Smooth muscle surrounds hollow organs, like your digestive system. It's involuntary and has one nucleus per, well, that was ridiculous, per cell. Okay, here's what the skeletal muscle looks like up here. Here's what the cardiac muscle tissue looks like. It looks very different, yes? Because you see some spaces, but you also see these things right here. These allow the action potential to spread out more rapidly because you want all of these muscle cells to contract at the same time, so you have a coordinated contraction. And the other thing is that these cells branch. That's going in a straight line and then it branches. That's going in a straight line and it branches. So those are two distinguishing microscopic characteristics of cardiac muscle compared to skeletal muscle. Now, smooth muscle is said to be spindle-shaped. That's how it's described. And there are some slides I've seen that look sort of like that, but anyway, that's what it looks like. Then our last category is nervous tissue, and neurons are the primary cell in the nervous system, and they look, something like that. And they receive stimuli through these receptors here. These are called dendrites. And they send an action potential down this extension called an axon. It's like an electrical current, and it flows only in one direction from dendrites to axon. And then this will make a connection, or a synapse, to another nerve cell, or up to the brain, to another nerve cell. So there are two types of neural tissues. Neurons, that's this. That's your basic cell. That's the party. That's where the electricity flows. And then we have glial cells. The glial cells are supporting cells because your neurons, they don't reproduce. That's a bad thing, because if one gets damaged or destroyed, it can't be replaced. So these supportive cells function to assist neurons in their functions, such as protection, feeding, and enhancing action potentials. They're extraordinarily important, and there are more glial cells than there are neuron cells. This is what they look like. Okay? Moving on to organs. Organs contain two or more tissue types joined together to perform a specific function. An example would be the heart. The heart obviously has muscle, but it also has blood vessels. You know, those cardiac arteries that get blocked and you get a heart attack. So there are blood vessels in it. And blood vessels are made of, as you remember, or they're at least lined with epithelial tissue. They also have some smooth muscle in them, and they have connective tissue. So right there you have three different connective tissues. The heart also has a skeleton, which is made out of fibrous connective tissue. Then organ systems are groups of organs working together to perform a function, like the cardiovascular system. We have the heart, but then the heart is just a pump, and the pump has to be connected to tubes to take the blood out to all the 70 trillion cells in your body. So that's two different organ systems, two different organs in a system. So now this is stuff that really should be covered earlier, but that's okay. So we have body cavities, and if you ever see a skeleton, you can see that there are cavities there. So just some vocabulary. The front of your body is called anterior. The back of your body is called posterior. So in the anterior cavity, we have the thoracic cavity, which lies within your rib cage, superior or above your diaphragm. Then there's the abdominal cavity, which lies below your diaphragm, and that's where your abs, your abdominal muscles are in front. If I had a skeleton, I could show. We have a picture coming up. And then we have these serous membranes, and these surround your heart, your two separate lungs, and your abdominal organs. And these serous membranes are double layered, so they're sort of like that, but they're very, very close together, like two sheets of saran wrap, plastic wrap. And then in here is mucus, so these two slide over each other. So when the heart beats and it moves this, it decreases the friction to maintain the low temperature of the heart. So when you rub your hands together, it makes friction and your hands get hot. That's what would happen if you didn't have this membrane here. So that's what that's for. So here's your body. And this is your thoracic cavity here, the whole thing. This is your pleural cavity, your left pleural cavity. And this is your left lung, and this is your right lung. So that's surrounded by a serous membrane called the pleura. And this is your heart, and it's surrounded by a serous membrane called, the peri, which means around, cardium. Okay? And then in the abdomen, there's a membrane. It doesn't cover everything, but it covers most things. And this is called the peritoneum. Okay? And this whole thing is the abdominal cavity. Okay? So tissue membranes, the serous membranes, they line, this is wrong, line. I used dragon to do this and I didn't correct my spelling. Line and lubricate internal body cavities and reduce friction between organs. Mucous membranes are very similar, but they line your airways. That's why your nose runs, your digestive tract and reproductive tracts, and they lubricate the surfaces and capture debris. Synovial membranes line the spaces in your joints. Cutaneous membranes is the outer covering of your body. So we're going to talk about body positions, and I'm just going to show you these pictures. We have three different planes that we talk about. A plane is one of these, this pink thing or this blue thing or this greeny thing. And it divides you into sections so that we can better describe bodily tissues. So the one that runs from front to back it's a sagittal plane. This particular sagittal plane is the mid-sagittal plane, but you can also have a sagittal plane that runs here or here, or you can have an infinite number of them from left to right. But that's the sagittal plane. Then you have this transverse plane. It's also called horizontal plane, and this is just one that they put here, but you can move it up all the way to the top up here. And if you took a plane, a horizontal plane right here, and you then looked at what, I don't know how to explain this very well. But if you looked at this section right here, what you would see is this, because all we're doing is cutting off the very tip top of her head. So you would see that, and maybe you would see some brain tissue inside. Okay? And then the last one is divide you into front and back parts, and this is the coronal plane or frontal plane. Frontal plane, that's this one right here, and it moves from front to back. Anything that, if you have a lesion right here, then you can say that that's inferior to your chin. Or if you have a lesion, and a lesion is like a cut or anything that's a mole, anything that's wrong. This one is superior to this one, and this one is inferior to this one. So you have to say it relative to something else. Then obviously the front of her is the anterior, the back of her is the posterior, and then we have superior is the top of the head, and inferior is right here. Okay? And down here it's called proximal and distal, but they don't go over that in your book. So now we're going to talk about the integumentary skin system, which is your skin. And the skin has an epithelial layer on top, and then it has connective tissue underneath that, and then a fatty layer underneath that. So it also contains your hair, your nails, and your glands. And obviously it protects you from dehydrating or injury, it defends you from microorganisms, it regulates your body temperature, it helps to make vitamin D, and it provides sensation. It holds the neurons which collect information from the outside world to send back to the nervous system, the central nervous system. So we have the epidermis. This is the outer layer. What you can see with your eyes, it's composed of stratified squamous epithelial cells that does not contain blood vessels, but it's only about the thickness of the side of a dime. It's about, okay. The palms of your hands and the soles of your feet are a little bit thicker. There are two major cell types within the epidermis. This is a modified epithelial. These are modified epithelial cells. A keratinocyte, which is a protein that provides waterproofing and toughness, and melanocytes give you your skin color. This is what skin looks like. Here are the, this is the epidermis up here, just this very top part, okay? Then the dermis, this is this loose connective tissue, and then the hypodermis. Hypo means underneath. So this is a sweat gland. You know it's a sweat gland because it goes all the way to the top. The oil glands, or sebaceous glands, right, they go into the hair shaft. That's how you know the difference between these two glands. Here's a vein and an artery. Remember that it only goes up to the border of the epidermis. It doesn't enter the epidermis. So these are your capillary beds here. Okay? These are all nerve endings, nerve ending, nerve ending. This is a deep touch, and this is superficial touch like pain and light touch. So there's the hair shaft is here. Then you have this little muscle called the erector pili muscle, and it makes your hair stand up. So the dermis, which is deep to the epidermis, supports the underlying tissues, and it supports the epidermis, contains collagen, elastic. It's that loose or areolar tissue, so you know it has fibroblasts and white blood cells. Then this is hair. The hair, the shaft, and the follicle. The follicle is the little part that forms the hair cells, and the hair is made of protein. Smooth muscle attached to the hair that makes it stand up. Oil glands attached to the hair. Softens your skin, keeps the hair soft. You have sweat glands, blood vessels, and sensory nerve endings, as you saw in the picture. So the epidermis actually has these 5 layers. Basement membrane, remember, basement membrane. And then these are the dividing cells. So this is your basement layer. These are very, very actively, mitotically, they'll be dividing, and they push upwards. This is the keratin which is what the keratinocytes secrete. And as it gets higher, it's almost all keratin up here. Okay. Homeostasis. Since we are a multicellular organism containing 70 trillion cells, the cells cannot go out and eat and maintain their own lives. They must be taken care of by the rest of the body systems. The process of caring for the cells of your body and maintaining a stable internal environment is called homeostasis. Homeostasis is maintained by negative feedback loops. These are deviations from... So what happens is, say that you walk outside and it's very hot. Well, your skin will pick up the extra heat like a thermometer and send that information to the brain. The brain will compute that new temperature, and it will set off the air conditioning system of your body, which is your sweat glands. Your sweat glands will now produce more sweat. That sweat goes to the surface of your body, and as you move, it evaporates, and when it evaporates, it cools. When it cools, the capillaries under your skin will take that cooler blood and send it to the interior of your body. So that's how your body maintains its temperature. This is how it works. This is your brain. These are nerve endings. And this is the effector, so this would be the sweat gland. And this is your set points. You know, your body has to maintain itself between this temperature and this temperature. Now I'll just tell you that at 105 degrees, proteins start to denature. So you're going to start dying at 105. But it would take a while for you to die at 105. But you don't want it to go any higher than that. And then on the low end, it's somewhere in the low 90s, where there's just not enough heat to make molecules move around your body. So this is just another way to say the same thing. Oh, this is a movie that won't show. I don't think this will show. Will it? No. Okay. And that's all there is for this one.